So welcome to this lecture where we're going to look at the skills and mindset of an effective futurist. So let's start off with some definitions. The practitioners of futurist thinking are known as futurists. Now, futurists aim to discover or invent, to propose, examine, evaluate probable and preferable futures. Now, skills are the ability to do something well, and mindsets are the established set of attitudes held by someone. So in this lecture then we're going to look at the skills and mindsets of an effective futurist. And what I'm going to describe in this lecture are not just mindsets and skills for a chosen few leaders. These are skills and attitudes we all need to develop to be effective in today's world of rapid change. What we call a VUCA world. Now VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I always come back to the Donald Rumsfeld quote, and I love this quote. And he said, there are known knowns. These are things we know that we know. And then there are known unknowns. That is to say, these are things that we know we don't know. But then there are also unknown unknowns. And these are things we don't know. So there's a lot of wisdom in that quote in relation to futurist thinking, because we have to shift our focus from answering questions to figuring out the right questions to ask in the first place. And most of our schooling, if you look at education, involves solving problems that are knowable and measurable, where performance and accuracy are prized. Now this approach is fine in a world of known knowns, but in a world of unknown unknowns, there's a lot of complexity and the world is very ambiguous. And when I say ambiguous, I mean, open to more than one interpretation or not having one obvious meaning. There's a lot of uncertainty. So this is the type of world we live in today, a VUCA world. And in many cases, it's not only that we don't know how to solve the problem, we don't even know what the problem is. So in school, they don't teach us this foresight. They don't teach us the ability to predict what's going to happen or be needed in the future. Now, there's neglect of foresight education in most educational systems, and I know that is the same here in my country, Ireland. The vast majority of students in schools around the world are never taught how to think critically about futures or strategies for developing improved foresight. Now, our education system don't teach us to deal with uncertainty and the unknown, and the systems don't teach us how to deal with these unknown unknowns. Now, education systems are socially conservative around the world and they're slow to change. Now, further complicating matters are the many cognitive biases that limit and distort our perception of the future. Now, the brain's hardwiring that limits our ability to imagine significant change. Now, a cognitive bias is a systemic error in thinking that occurs when people are processing and interpreting information in the world around them, and it affects the decisions and judgments that they make. In a VUCA world, we need an outward-facing mode of contextual scanning, questioning, hypothesis formation, experimentation, and learning. We need to be keen and curious observers. We need to seek ideas and perspectives from diverse people and places. We need to be comfortable with ambiguity. And this ability to see the big picture, to ask divergent questions, to make sense of patterns, and separate the signals from the noise, these are far more important than rushing to a finite answer to the wrong problem. So let's look at another important attribute of futures, and that's a great imagination. And this drive to investigate, to describe to others a world that's very different from the one that we live in now, is what makes futures work such an imaginative field. Futurists must be able to consider the very many possible consequences and widespread ripple effects of things that haven't happened yet. Futurists need strong opinions lightly held, and that's an important mindset for the futurist. This enables us to make decisions quickly with incomplete information. We form a tentative hypothesis about what's going on. A hypothesis is a proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. We then actively gather information that either supports or refutes the hypothesis. So the important part is that if you uncover information that refutes or disproves the hypothesis, then change your hypothesis quickly. So we actively seek contradictory information. This is what a strong opinion lightly held means. Now, another important aspect of future thinking is that we need that sense of agency. The future is open. There are very many possible futures out there, and these can emerge, and we can influence the future that emerges, and that's something really important. So that sense of agency refers to the feeling of control over actions and their consequences. So shaping the future requires that we embrace our agency to change it. This is important. This is a really important mindset for futurists, but also for all of us. Now, anticipation is another core futurist skill. We might not be able to predict the future with certainty, but we certainly can see where it's headed by learning to recognize patterns, connections, and identifiable trends. So keeping one's eyes open, being sensitive to changes, being creative, being receptive, intuitive, and being curious, these are needed, all these skills are needed to find weak signals of change. Now, a weak signal is an existing thing or phenomenon that can be interpreted as an indicator of potentially greater change. So we're going to come back to weak signals in an upcoming lecture because it's really important in terms of futures thinking. We also need to be systems thinkers. Futurists are usually looking at how dramatic changes play out across big landscapes. An entire industry, a city, nation, or an entire generation's lived experiences of major human institutions like work, like school, like governance, healthcare, or the family. And systems thinking is a way of making sense of the complexity of the world by looking at it in terms of wholes and relationships rather than by splitting it down into parts. And this ability to see problems through a series of connected relationships is a really important skill of the futurist. Another important attribute of a futurist is to not be easily upset by criticism. Now, there's a very well-known futurist called Jim Dator, and he said, because new technologies permit new behaviors and values, challenging old beliefs and values, which are based on prior technologies, much of what is characterized by the future is initially novel and challenging. So it typically seems at first obscene or impossible or stupid or science fiction or ridiculous. So until it becomes familiar, then it eventually becomes normal. So whatever is popularly or even professionally considered to be the most likely future is often one of the least likely futures. So if futurists then expect to be useful, they should expect to be ridiculed for their ideas initially, and perhaps for these ideas to be rejected. Now, some of these ideas, of course, may deserve ridicule and rejection, but even the useful ideas about the futures may also be ridiculed. So decision makers, the general public, then if they wish information about the future to be useful, they should expect it to be unconventional and often shocking or offensive or seeming ridiculous. Now, futurists, however, they also have the additional burden of making the initially ridiculous idea plausible and actionable by marshalling appropriate evidence and weaving appropriate or alternative scenarios of its possible developments. So this is where the compelling communicator skills come in for futurists. So this is another really important skill of the futurist, to be able to communicate these ideas. So as futurists, then, we really do need to be good communicators. So we've covered a lot of ground in this lecture. A lot of the skills and mindsets, they're not just important for futurists, but all of us. We need to learn these in the world of the fourth industrial revolution. So in summary then, we live in an uncertain world, and futurists, and all of us, I believe, should develop these skills and attributes. We need to become good at dealing with uncertainty. We need to become comfortable with ambiguity, or uncertainty and not knowing and having multiple meanings. We also need skills in contextual scanning, exploring, questioning, hypothesis formation, experimentation and learning. Futurists need creativity, receptivity, intuition and curiosity. Futurists need a good imagination. They need strong opinions lightly held, a sense of agency. And futurists need to think broadly across disciplines and expertise and not just in their own particular silos. So finally then, futurists need to be compelling communicators, because we really have to be able to convince others and to get people to see different alternatives and to challenge assumptions. So these are the skills and mindsets of futurists, and for all of us as well, I believe. So I hope you have enjoyed this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture. Thank you.